Uh, just thinking about music, there's a pretty good case to be made for the idea that music is kind of like language, that it exhibits sort of similar properties and an organization in the brain that may be kind of similar to language. So it's similar to language in many of its properties, but that coexists. It is a consciousness all its own, and it manifests itself in the world in different ways. As such, that puts a lot of emphasis on our understanding of music and what it means. I think that means that there should be a lot more people making music, the human ability to create music. I think could be innate, and that it exhibits similar creative properties as language. One's ability to interpret music is sort of like one's language acquisition, and that there could be a very real reason why, for as long as we can remember, the noise or sort of the music. Parents have always thought that their kids' music sounds like noise, and this could actually be because your sort of critical period, what they talk about in linguistics, there's a certain point in time in which you can and can't freely or sort of intuitively acquire a language. That's not to say that you can't learn a language, but later on in life. But we all know that there's, the younger you are, the better when it comes to things like your accent, and that should be puzzling to us. That should seem strange, because there's this very important skill that is kind of hard to get good at, right? Learning a foreign language after the critical period, after about the age of 13, becomes really tricky for some reason. We should be puzzled by the fact that our brain changes in this fundamental way. And so similarly, there maybe is just some sort of musical flexibility that's built into your brain, that sort of shuts itself off after a certain point, and that if you have sort of a pretty narrow version of what your musical world or sort of lexicon or sort of whatever, the discrete units of music interpretation are for people. You can chop it up a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, there are going to be sort of these elements that a music has. And so we can think of a music like we talk about a language. And so then, there's sort of a seemingly independent from language anyway. You can have a song stuck in your head and be using language, right? I'm sort of jamming to something in my own head right now as I talk. Can you hear it? Here goes. Anyway, the fact that you can do that and talk at the same time. Although, yeah, to what extent can you? How much attention are you paying to things like this? But there's a really interesting book called, I think it's called This Is Your Brain on Music. And in it, there's a lot of really interesting things. The current science, I think, the author looks upon it with a sense of wonder, as one should. I think that the brain's ability to hear music, this is actually a very startling thing, I think, that's happening psychologically. But yeah, can you use them at the same time? Do they occupy similar cognitive spaces? They seem to sort of spring from the same well. And have different purposes. And I think this is a good example of something that does not have a clear sort of evolutionary purpose, other than it just sounds cool. There may be, some hints as to what we can sort of do with music that relate possibly to how our brains just how our brains work, how, on what sort of level does our brain process and store information, because we're taking the outside world and somehow encoding it on the inside. And so with music, it's a very odd thing. There's a quote by Frank Zappa. Say what you will about Frank Zappa's music, but you just gotta listen to this guy as a philosopher of music. He had some pretty good ideas about the world. Anyway, not to I myself I do happen to like the music of Frank Zappa. 30% of it, if I could curate 30% of his music, there's just this really kind of oddly, melodic thing that he does sometimes that I'm a big fan of. And his guitar playing is always really good. But he said, the point of this whole thing is me telling you that he said that science is beautiful. I don't remember the quote exactly, but this, science is beautiful, art is breathtaking, but music is the best. Music is the best. And I think he might be right. I think it sort of taps into, our notion of consciousness. The fact that we do sort of assume it seems to very clearly show that time seems to be important to what we're doing. Our notion of time, which may actually be kind of made up, but that we through music you can see, right? Music takes place over time, right? And what your brain is doing is somehow putting together spatial relationships in time, the music. And I'll be getting into this a little more as it gets colder and things move inside a little, as far as the garden and other areas, right? The garden inside your head. I like thinking of that sort of idea that there is a laboratory inside your head, just as there is one in the garden. And I read something similar about Chomsky. his, the goal of linguistics used to be to sort of, catalog the world's languages. But with the sort of Chomskyan revolution, the field, meaning the place where you go, where you work to find your, new languages, where you do your research, the place where you do your research, is now in your head. And I think, probably true. When you enter the worlds of abstraction, you can do things like that. And so exploring your sort of improvisational skills, I think, it's, if you're like me and you like thinking about gardening, then you will have a internal model in your head, and you will have sort of a simulation. You can simulate ideas. So, for example, over here on this is the sunniest side of my garden. I want to get more shade there. Okay. I still want it to be, high sunlight area. But I don't know. It's things like corn seem to do fine, but stuff like curcubits almost get a little wilty. Anyway, so I, think that what if I planted okra there sparsely? Maybe one okra every 7 feet or something like that. If I was doing that, then things can get pretty interesting. You can really control a lot. So at that point it just becomes an interesting game, sort of maximizing your space or minimizing your work, or I don't know, just whatever it is that you're trying to do. But if we're making a little model in our heads of how agriculture works, then it's interesting, because instead of if you have a model in your head of how the world works, and it happens to coincide with the way that the internal model happens to actually coincide with the way that the external model works, then you're really on to something. So similarly, so mathematics to me seems to be an example of the external world. We've found an example of the external world looking like our original computational system, that there is something that the brain is doing to mash up model upon model. Anyway, so if you can build a little garden in your imagination, then in theory, what if we find out that you can grow things in your mind just as with the same sort of properties, that we can sort of discover a new mathematics of nature, of biological nature. By just really observing things in sort of newly abstract ways. Just think about that, Build a little model of a garden in your head, and then just play around with it, like you do here. So I'm thinking, I could sparsely plant some things. But there's all sorts of combinations you can do if you notice that. Well, I guess what I'm saying is I generally notice over here that it's a little drier. that the soil dries out a little quicker. And I'm trying to get away with doing no watering externally, and I think it is possible. But anyway, yeah, the more you understand about how plants work, and the more sort of flexibility you have about how plants can work through genetic diversity, I think will open up a lot of really cool and imaginative ideas. Who knows? Maybe they'll make a video game of this. They'll make a video game, and it will be fun. Here's the thing: they'll make a video game of like simulating growing land races and growing them in polyculture. I think in the future there will be this video game, or if not, we should make it. But it goes like this: in the video game, you have simulated. You have sort of models of what these seeds do, and when they'll grow, how, and then in the game, you just throw out a bunch of seeds. So it's going to be really processor intensive, I can tell. But this is a good, a fun game to play, because it's like, this is something that on a certain level can be modeled. We all agree that we, have models. I have a model in my head of how daikon grows, right? And this is something that seems to be working, for one thing. I seem to be getting better at growing daikon. Not that it's hard to grow, really. If you grow it in the right season, it grows nicely. But anyway, but this model exists somehow in the meat of my brain, I guess is the point. And there might be a little land racer in the brain who guides things to abstraction, or sort of organizes information. So build a little garden in your head. But anyway, want to go back to what I was talking about with the video game. Land Race, the video game, will be it will be fun to play, but it will be there will be no comparison to the real thing. The 3D version. The version with the temperature. It might not be to your liking. I've been thinking a lot about air conditioning. I do think that this is something that we have to accept that humans are always going to want to be more comfortable than they currently are. Because we have this sort of theoretical notion of what comfort is, right? I know that technically I don't have to feel this way, right? I'm not sure if other animals, that could be sort of our key thing. Humans, right? Sort of sucks about it, is that you know that things could get better. And then you try to make it better. You try to control it, right? To always be in such a controlled environment. We've been wearing clothes for a while now, and I know some people want to be naked all the time. But it is sort of like, why does it matter? The clothes thing, it is like, we can't, although it's strange to our cultural minds, if you look at it from a sort of really objective view, there's just no, it is like just kind of weird that we do always wear clothes. Except that you consider we go, we go to environments in which, this is, I'm sounding like a dumbass. You go to environments where, it's going to get cold, whatever, that's fine. And so you got to put some clothes on, right? And suddenly everyone's wearing clothes. It is sort of a distinguishing factor. Perhaps it's, there's maybe some sort of history really far down the line of what nudity came to mean, while coexisting with the Neanderthals or something, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty weird being human. I think we should all be kind of surprised by what it is, to be a human on a planet. This planet. But anyway, build a little garden in your head.